Hey there, how you doing? I'm back today with another black metal album review. And today I'll be doing actually a split album between two bands that I really respect in this genre of music. And those bands are definitely Horna and Behexen on this split album release here, which doesn't really have a title, which is, generally the case for split albums. Now you can see from the cover art here again that it sort of follows that old school black and white black metal style. And this is definitely an album that, makes reference to the classic old school styles of black metal. So yeah, let's get into the music. What you get on here is 4 tracks from Horna and 3 tracks from Behexen, which is interesting for a number of reasons. The first reason this is interesting is because typically on split releases, the bands tend to have the same number of tracks. And although this is not the case in this particular instance, they have a similar amount of music here, running around 20 minutes per artist, which gives you almost 40 minutes of material on this release. That's a good amount of material for a split album, in my opinion. So I was quite thrilled with that. And this is also very, well-written material. There's no really weak tracks on here whatsoever. I found this as an enjoyable album, listening through it all the way from start to finish. Now, if any of you are familiar with my musical taste and the bands I'm interested in, you probably know that I'm a big Sargeist fan. And both of these bands are bands that share members with that particular band, which is Sargeist, which is sort of how I got interested in this. And this was also my introduction to Horna and Behexen from an official standpoint of me actually owning their music. So this is a very special album to me, a very enjoyable one, and I'll explain to you why. Now, first let's talk about Horna. Horna has a sound that is very different from Behexen's style, and what you get with Horna is almost like a old school punk, thrash influenced style of black metal. It almost makes reference to, say, Old Darkthrone if you listen to their albums such as A Blaze in the Northern Sky, where it's very raw and has almost, that heavy, punk, almost death metal sometimes references. This particular case is more punk, but it has those other more brutal references in there, which you can sort of appreciate as you listen to their 4 tracks on this release. Now, Horna is very interesting vocally because instead of going with the traditional black metal, vocal style, they go with more squeaks and squawks, which may sound similar if you're not that familiar with this genre of music, but it's actually quite different if you listen carefully enough. And what you even get is an example of something different that you get here is a random throw-in on the 3rd track, a little bit of punk yelling in there for a very short period of time, almost like clean vocals mixed with a bit of punk. I kind of like that as a nice little clip of an interesting vocal sort of diversion. Now, in terms of guitar, what you get on this release is a very different sound between the lead and the rhythm guitar. In here, the rhythm guitar falls in line with the bass quite a lot, but the lead guitar is very almost thin and very distinct. It almost cuts through the rest of the music and provides some of the more interesting parts. So it's almost like there's 2 different songs going on at the same time with the lead guitar and the rhythm parts playing in the style that they do here. Now, in terms of drumming, you get almost like punk drumming here, which is, I guess, one of the big influences in black metal. You can definitely say that a lot of black metal bands take their drumming style from punk bands, which is reasonably accurate here in this particular half of the release. There's a few good fills and things in here, but for the most part, it's pretty much, keep you pumped, balls to the wall kind of drumming here, which I kind of appreciate. And the bass can be heard. It does kind of flow into the rhythm guitar a bit, but it does work quite well. And my definitely top track here on this half of this release is the 2nd song, which is called something like Ratomirski, but I probably butchered that horribly. I don't speak Finnish whatsoever. And if you want to hear a very, punk, straightforward influenced song here, you want to listen to Verta Korila, which is the 4th song. So overall, the Horna half of this release it's a bit raw and it takes you a little while to get into. Sometimes if it's your first time listening to Horna, but it's a good section of music there and it's enjoyable. So I'd say it's quite solid. Now let's talk about Behexen a little bit here. If you're familiar with Behexen, you know that they like to use very atmospheric and echoey elements in their music. And they do that here to provide an atmosphere in a way that's very different from the way Horna did it. With Horna's music, it was more so like played a very raw music, and the atmosphere came as a result of that music. But in this particular case with Behexen, the atmosphere is almost like a key element in their writing process, which you can really tell from the way the songs are laid out. They typically use, pretty aggressive drumming as well, but it's slightly different in style. But what sets them apart from Horna is that they have more long, flowing, atmospheric passages in the guitar work. And their vocals are more of the old school classic black metal sound. Nothing too fancy there with vocals, but it's really the guitars and the long, winding riffs and passages that make the second half of this release quite excellent and very enjoyable altogether. My favorite track on the second half of this release is definitely Distant Call from Darkness. Now, if you listen to My Soul for His Glory, which I reviewed in a previous video, this song almost sounds like a precursor to My Stigma's Bleeding Black. You can definitely hear that there's a similarity between those two tracks, and they're two of the songs that I most enjoy from the band. If you listen to the second last track on this release as well, which is called Beyond the Shadow of My Lord, you can hear that Behexen is doing a little bit of experimentation here, writing a very stagnant song that keeps you, almost feels like you're trapped inside the song to some extent, but in a good and kind of creepy way. It feels like they play two modal parts and jump back and forth between them to build a lot of tension. They sort of relieve it at the end of the song. And this is a band that makes very epic, very tense music that relieves itself in very interesting ways. And that's one of the things I really like about Behexen, is that tension that they build and that expectation you get from listening to one of their songs. And definitely they do that quite well here, even I'd say more so than on their most recent album, My Soul for His Glory. Fewer punk and thrash elements in the Behexen music here as on perhaps some of their newer material. It's almost strictly that sort of flowing, winding passages of atmospheric black metal, classic stuff. So I definitely say I enjoyed the Behexen half of this album a little more than the Horna, but that's just because maybe because I'm very familiar with that band and I enjoy their music altogether even before fully listening to this release here. So overall, I definitely recommend this release here. It was recorded in 2003 and 2004, but not released until 2007. Overall, a classic black metal release. There's nothing to really hate on this one. Overall, great vibe, great distinction between the two bands, and lots of memorable music. Hope everyone has a great weekend, and take care. Bye.